The slap echoed through the private jet cabin at 40,000 feet, and in that split second, Chloe Martinez went from invisible service worker to the woman who would change billionaire Damon Washington's life forever. It's so great to have you here. If you're ready to dive into today's captivating story, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from around the world. I love connecting with viewers from everywhere. Speaking of which, I've got another fascinating story lined up for you tomorrow that I think you'll find just as compelling as today's tale. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. But enough about tomorrow. Let's jump into today's story. Queens, New York, Tuesday, October 15, 2024, 4:47 a.m. Chloe Martinez pressed her forehead against the cool bathroom mirror, watching her breath fog the glass. 28 years old, and already she felt ancient. The coral blazer of her flight attendant uniform hung on the door behind her, wrinkled from yesterday's 14-hour shift. In 3 hours, she'd put it on again. Her phone buzzed. Another text from the hospital billing department. Final notice. Rosa Martinez. Outstanding balance. $47,832. Payment required within 72 hours to continue treatment. She deleted it without reading the rest. Mija, you're up early. Her mother's voice drifted through the thin walls of their two-bedroom apartment in Elmhurst. Rosa Martinez emerged from the kitchen wearing the bright yellow headscarf that had become her signature since chemotherapy started 6 months ago. Even with the weight loss, even with the shadows under her eyes, she moved with the same grace that had carried her through 20 years as a hotel housekeeper. Couldn't sleep. Chloe forced brightness into her voice. Coffee. Already made some. Sit. The kitchen table wobbled under Rosa's gentle touch as she set down 2 steaming mugs. The same table where Chloe had done homework as a kid, where she'd written her college applications, where she'd cried after dropping out of nursing school to take care of bills. Newspapers from the bodega covered water stains on its surface. You're working too much. Rosa's fingers, thinner now but still warm, traced circles on Chloe's wrist. I see you counting money at night. I see the letters you hide. Mama, please. This old woman isn't blind. Rosa's voice carried that particular mix of tenderness and steel that Chloe remembered from childhood corrections. How bad is it? Chloe stared into her coffee. Steam rose between them like the ghosts of conversations they couldn't have. The foreclosure notice sat folded in her purse by the door, dated for next Wednesday. 7 days. We'll figure it out, Chloe whispered. Rosa reached across and cupped her daughter's face. You know what your father used to say. That God gives the hardest battles to his strongest soldiers. No, Mija. He used to say that love finds a way through any storm. Rosa's thumb brushed away a tear Chloe didn't realize had fallen. Even when we can't see the path. Manhattan, same morning, 6:15 a.m. Damon Washington stood at the windows of his penthouse office, watching the sun paint the East River gold. 40 stories below, the city moved with its usual ruthless energy. His reflection stared back from the glass. 6'2" frame wrapped in a royal blue cashmere sweater, dark skin that still carried the memory of summers working construction in Detroit, eyes that revealed nothing. His phone displayed 17 missed calls from his publicist. The Forbes cover story would hit newsstands tomorrow. The Quiet Billionaire, How Damon Washington Built a Tech Empire Without the Drama. They'd photographed him in this same office, against these same windows. What they couldn't capture was the weight of arriving here alone. Sir. His assistant, Jennifer, appeared in the doorway. Blonde, efficient, careful to maintain exactly the right distance between professional and personal. Like everyone else in his orbit, she wanted something. The paycheck, the networking opportunities, the proximity to power. The jet's ready for Miami? Fueled and prepped. Your guests are confirmed for the 9 a.m. departure. She consulted her tablet. Marcus Chen from Goldman Sachs, his wife, and their daughter. Oh, and the new flight attendant started yesterday. Chloe Martinez. Excellent reviews from her previous employer. Damon turned from the window. Previous employer? Commercial airline. Delta. 5 years of service, no complaints. Jennifer's fingers danced across her screen. She's working this flight to build private aviation experience. Very professional. He nodded. Another person whose life he'd briefly touched before she moved on to whatever came next. The pattern never changed. People performed their roles, collected their money, and disappeared. Safer that way. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. Baby, money can't buy you everything. But it sure can show you who people really are. She'd been wrong about the first part. Money could buy almost everything. The second part, though, she'd nailed that one. Teterboro Airport, New Jersey, 8:45 a.m. Chloe checked her reflection in the aircraft's galley mirror one final time. The coral uniform fit perfectly, pressed to crisp lines. Her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, makeup applied with precision despite 3 hours of sleep. She looked competent, professional, invisible. The way she preferred it. The Gulfstream G650 gleamed around her like something from a magazine. Cream leather seats arranged in conversation clusters. A bedroom in the back with Egyptian cotton sheets. A galley stocked with Dom Perignon and Wagyu beef. She'd served on commercial flights where 300 passengers shared 2 bathrooms. This aircraft had 4, each larger than her bedroom at home. First private jet? Captain Rodriguez appeared in the galley doorway. Puerto Rican like her father had been, with kind eyes and 20 years of aviation experience written in the confidence of his movements. That obvious. You're not the first commercial girl to make the jump. Different world up here. Passengers expect invisible perfection. They pay premium prices to forget they're not alone in the sky. Chloe nodded. She understood invisible. She'd been practicing it her whole life. The owner's particular about service, Rodriguez continued. Damon Washington. Built his first company at 19, sold it for $50 million by 25. Smart as hell, but he tests people. Sees how they react under pressure. Tests how? You'll know it when you see it. Rodriguez moved toward the cockpit, then paused. Word of advice? Don't take anything personal. Rich folks live in a different reality than us. The passengers arrived in a black Mercedes Sprinter. Marcus Chen stepped out first. Investment banker in his 50s, expensive suit, the kind of man who'd never worried about a medical bill in his life. His wife, Patricia, emerged next, dripping jewelry that could pay for Rose's treatment twice over. Their teenage daughter, Vanessa, looked bored already. Then Damon Washington. He moved differently than the others. No wasted motion, no performance. Just quiet confidence that filled space without demanding it. The royal blue sweater looked casual until you noticed the perfect fit, the quality of the fabric. His eyes swept the aircraft interior, noting details most people would miss. When his gaze met hers, Chloe felt an odd flutter. Not attraction exactly, but recognition. Like seeing someone across a crowded room and knowing, somehow, that your paths would cross in ways that mattered. Good morning, she said, extending her hand. I'm Chloe Martinez, your flight attendant today. His handshake was firm, brief, professional. Damon Washington. Coffee to start? Please. Black. She turned toward the galley, but his voice stopped her. Ms. Martinez? This is your first private flight. It wasn't a question. Heat rose in her cheeks. Yes, sir. But I have 5 years of commercial experience, and I've reviewed all protocols for. Relax. Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. Just wanted to know who was taking care of us today. As she prepared coffee, Chloe caught fragments of conversation from the main cabin. Stock prices, acquisition targets, numbers that represented more money than she'd see in a lifetime. Vanessa Chen complained about the Wi-Fi speed. Patricia wanted the cabin temperature adjusted 3 times. Damon said little, but she felt his attention like heat from a fire. When she served his coffee, their fingers brushed for an instant. Electric. Unexpected. Thank you, he said quietly. She returned to the galley, pulse racing for no reason she could name. Through the small window, clouds stretched endlessly below. Somewhere in those clouds, her old life waited. The bills, the foreclosure notice, the slow drowning in circumstances beyond her control. But here, at 35,000 feet, serving people who lived without limits, she could pretend for a few hours that dignity was something she could afford to keep. The aircraft banked slightly, beginning its descent toward Miami. Chloe checked her watch. 4 hours and 17 minutes until they touched down. In that time, everything she thought she knew about herself, about power, about the invisible lines that separated her world from his, would shatter completely. She just didn't know it yet. 5 hours into flight, above Georgia, 2:20 p.m. The afternoon sun slanted through the aircraft windows, casting everything in golden light. Chloe had fallen into the rhythm of service. Refilling drinks, adjusting temperature controls, clearing meal plates from a lunch of pan-seared salmon that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Marcus Chen dominated the conversation from his leather seat, gesturing with a crystal tumbler of 18-year-old scotch. The renewable energy sector is ripe for disruption. Solar manufacturing costs have dropped 40% in 2 years. Which is why I'm buying 3 companies instead of building from scratch, Damon replied, his voice measured. He'd barely touched his meal, attention focused on a tablet displaying financial projections. Patricia Chen examined her manicured nails. Darling, business talk gives me such a headache. Vanessa, put your phone away. We're having a family conversation. Vanessa, 17 and radiating the particular boredom of wealthy teenagers, didn't look up from her screen. This isn't family conversation. This is Dad showing off for Mr. Washington. Vanessa. What? It's true. Everyone knows why we're really here. The girl's voice carried that cutting honesty that only adolescents possessed. Dad wants Mr. Washington to invest in his new fund. We're props. Marcus's face flushed red above his collar. That's enough. But Vanessa was just getting started. At least be honest about it. We're here because you need his money. Just like every other person who. I said enough. Marcus's voice cracked like a whip through the cabin. The teenager flinched, then retreated behind her phone screen. The cabin fell silent except for the steady hum of engines. Damon watched the entire exchange without expression. Then, his gaze found Chloe in the galley doorway. Ms. Martinez? A word. She approached his seat, notepad ready. Yes, sir. I need you to handle a situation. His voice was quiet, controlled. Mr. Chen has some important documents in his briefcase. Investment projections for a deal we're discussing. I'd like you to organize them for our review. Chloe glanced toward Marcus, who was staring out the window, jaw clenched. Of course, sir. Should I? There's just one problem. Damon's eyes held hers, steady and unreadable. Vanessa spilled her juice on them about an hour ago. Red cranberry juice. All over the papers. Chloe's stomach dropped. She'd been serving drinks for 5 hours. No one had spilled anything. She'd have noticed, would have cleaned it immediately. I'm sorry, sir, but I don't recall. Are you questioning what I'm telling you happened? The cabin had gone dead quiet. Patricia Chen looked up from her magazine. Marcus turned from the window. Even Vanessa lowered her phone. Chloe felt heat creep up her neck. No, sir. I'm very careful about spills. If something had happened. So you're saying I'm lying? The word hung in the air like a challenge. Chloe's pulse hammered in her ears. She thought of Rose's yellow headscarf, of the foreclosure notice, of the hospital bills that never stopped coming. No, sir. Of course not. If you say there was a spill, then there was a spill. How can I fix this? That's what I'm asking you. Damon leaned back in his seat, fingers steepled. These are one-of-a-kind documents. Financial projections that took months to prepare. They represent a $50 million deal. How do you propose to fix something that can't be unfixed? Chloe's mouth went dry. She glanced around the cabin, desperate for some solution, some way to navigate this impossible situation. Marcus Chen watched her with the detached interest of someone observing an insect under glass. Patricia had returned to her magazine, already bored. Vanessa stared openly, recognizing blood in the water. I could try to dry them. Maybe we have supplies on board that could try to dry them. Damon's voice carried no emotion. You want to try to dry documents that represent months of work and $50 million worth of negotiations. Chloe's training kicked in automatically. Apologize. De-escalate. Find a solution. I'm very sorry, sir. Perhaps I could contact your office? Have them email copies. Email copies of confidential financial documents? Do you understand the security issues involved in transmitting sensitive investment data? Each question felt like a trap closing tighter around her. Chloe's breathing became shallow. The cabin walls seemed to press inward. Sir, I want to help. Please tell me what you'd like me to do. I'd like you to take responsibility for your carelessness and fix what you broke. But I didn't. The words escaped before she could stop them. You didn't what? Chloe closed her eyes, summoned every ounce of professionalism she possessed. I apologize. How can I make this right? You can't. Damon's voice was flat, final. That's the point. Some mistakes can't be unmade. Some carelessness can't be forgiven. Do you understand that concept? Something inside Chloe cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like ice under pressure, holding its shape until the final moment when physics demanded surrender. She thought of Rosa, sleeping in the hospital bed last week because the insurance wouldn't cover a private room. She thought of her father, who died fixing other people's air conditioners because he couldn't afford to go to the doctor when chest pain started. She thought of every wealthy passenger who'd treated her like furniture with wings, who'd complained about service while wearing watches that cost more than she made in a year. Yes, sir. Her voice came out steady. I understand. Good. Because I want you to think about that understanding when you're looking for your next job. The crack became a fissure. The fissure became a break. My next job. Did I stutter? Damon's eyes were cold as winter. This is exactly the kind of carelessness that separates professional service from amateur hour. I'll be speaking with your employer about. Chloe's right hand moved before her brain caught up. The sound of palm meeting cheek echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Damon's head snapped to the side. His hand rose automatically to his face, fingers touching the red mark spreading across his dark skin. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the engine noise seemed muted, as if the aircraft itself was holding its breath. Patricia Chen's magazine slipped from her fingers to the floor. Marcus stared with his mouth slightly open. Vanessa's eyes went wide. Phone forgotten in her lap. Chloe stood frozen, her hand still burning from impact. The moment stretched like molten glass, everything suspended in the terrible space between action and consequence. Damon turned back to face her slowly. When his eyes met hers, she saw something she hadn't expected. Not rage. Not shock. Recognition. Well, he said quietly, his voice carrying a note she couldn't identify. That's interesting. Chloe's professional mask shattered completely. You want to fire me? Fine. You want to sue me? Get in line behind the hospital and the mortgage company. You want to destroy my life because I wouldn't play along with your twisted little game. Her voice rose with each word, 5 years of swallowed dignity finally finding its voice. I've served passengers who blamed me for weather delays. I've cleaned up after drunk executives who couldn't find the bathroom. I've smiled while being treated like I don't exist, like I'm not a human being with bills and problems and a mother dying of cancer. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. But I have never, not once, spilled anything on anyone's precious documents. So if you want to lie about what happened, if you want to test whether I'll humiliate myself for your entertainment, here's your answer. She stepped closer, close enough to see the surprise flickering in his dark eyes. I won't. Not for you, not for anyone. I'd rather be unemployed with my dignity than employed without it. The cabin remained silent. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into Miami International. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Chloe looked around the cabin one final time. Marcus Chen stared at his hands. Patricia pretended to read her magazine. Vanessa watched everything with the fascination of someone witnessing a car crash. And Damon Washington sat perfectly still, his fingers still pressed to his cheek, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "I'll be in the galley," Chloe said quietly, "preparing for landing. Unless you'd prefer I jump out without a parachute." She turned and walked away, leaving behind the wreckage of her career and the strange, unsettling awareness that something fundamental had shifted in the space between them. Behind her, she heard Damon Washington speak for the first time since the slap. "Marcus," he said, his voice thoughtful, "I think we need to reschedule our meeting." Miami International Airport. Gate 47, 4:15 p.m. The Gulfstream G650 sat motionless on the tarmac, its engines winding down with mechanical sighs. Through the small galley window, Chloe watched ground crews position the mobile stairs. Freedom. 20 feet of aluminum steps separating her from the wreckage of everything she'd worked for. Her hands shook as she completed the post-flight checklist. Secure galley equipment. Check emergency exits. Document any incidents. She stared at the incident report form. How did you write up slapping a billionaire? What box did you check for career suicide? The main cabin had fallen into the particular silence that followed disasters. Marcus Chen spoke in hushed tones into his phone, probably canceling whatever deals had depended on Damon's investment. Patricia gathered her purse and magazine with the careful movements of someone pretending nothing unusual had happened. Vanessa kept glancing toward the galley, her teenage curiosity warring with social awkwardness. And Damon Washington sat perfectly still in seat 2A, tablet dark in his lap, the red mark on his left cheek fading but still visible. Captain Rodriguez appeared in the galley doorway, his weathered face creased with concern. "Chloe, everything all right back here? Everything's perfect." Her voice came out too bright, too controlled. "Just finishing the checklist." Rodriguez glanced toward the main cabin, then back at her. 20 years of flying had taught him to read passenger dynamics like weather patterns. "Anything I need to know about?" She met his eyes. Rodriguez had 3 daughters, all working their way through college on service jobs and student loans. He understood the weight of paychecks, the mathematics of survival. "Nothing worth putting in the report," she said quietly. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Sometimes the best flights are the ones nobody talks about afterward." The passengers began disembarking. Marcus Chen first, phone still pressed to his ear, his voice carrying fragments of explanation and apology. Patricia followed, her designer heels clicking on the aircraft floor. "Thank you for a lovely flight," she said to Chloe, as if nothing had happened. As if the last 20 minutes existed in some parallel universe that didn't affect the polite fiction of normal life. Vanessa paused at the galley entrance. "That was the most interesting flight I've ever been on," she said, her voice carrying the honesty that her parents had carefully trained out of themselves. "My dad deserved what you said to him. He's been kissing up to Mr. Washington for months." "Vanessa." Patricia's sharp voice carried from the aircraft door. The teenager rolled her eyes but moved toward the exit. At the threshold she turned back. "For what it's worth. I don't think Mr. Washington is mad at you. He looks, I don't know, different." Then she was gone, leaving Chloe alone with the man whose face she'd slapped at 30,000 feet. Damon remained in his seat, making no move toward the exit. His fingers drummed a slow rhythm on the leather armrest. The silence stretched between them like a wire under tension. Finally, he spoke without looking at her. "In 15 years of business, no one has ever hit me." Chloe's throat felt raw. "I'm sure your lawyers will make certain it never happens again." "You think I'm going to sue you?" It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Aren't you?" Damon turned to face her then, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Not anger. Not the cold calculation she'd expected. Something closer to curiosity. "Tell me about your mother's cancer." The question hit her like cold water. "What? You mentioned it during your speech. Your mother has cancer." Chloe's hands clenched into fists. "Don't you dare use my family to." "I'm not using anything." His voice was quieter now, stripped of the testing edge that had driven her to violence. "I'm asking. Why?" Because I want to understand what I saw back there. What you saw was an employee having a breakdown because her boss decided to play psychological games for his own entertainment. Damon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried something she hadn't heard from him before: uncertainty. My mother died when I was 16. Diabetes complications. She couldn't afford insulin some months, so she'd ration it. Skip doses. Tell me she was feeling better when I could see her getting sicker. Chloe felt the foundation of her anger shift slightly, like sand under retreating waves. The day before she died, she made me promise never to let anyone treat me like I didn't matter. Like my life had less value because of where I came from or how much money I had. His fingers found the mark on his cheek, traced it absently. I've spent 18 years making sure that never happened again. By testing whether other people will let you treat them that way? The words escaped before Chloe could stop them. Damon's eyes snapped to hers, sharp and assessing. Yes, he said simply. By learning who people really are when there's something at stake. And what did you learn about me? That you're either very brave or very stupid. Despite everything, Chloe felt her lips twitch toward a smile. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Damon's face. No, they're not. The aircraft cleaning crew appeared at the door, waiting with professional patience for the cabin to empty. Their supervisor, a woman about Rose's age, gestured apologetically. We need to prep for the next flight, she called. Damon stood, gathering his tablet and jacket. At the galley entrance he paused. Ms. Martinez? I owe you an apology. Chloe blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that ranked somewhere below offering to pay Rose's medical bills. You don't owe me anything. I do. He adjusted his jacket, the movement careful and deliberate. What I did was cruel. It was designed to humiliate you, to see if you'd sacrifice your dignity for job security. That makes me exactly the kind of person I swore I'd never become. The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. The documents were never spilled, Chloe said. It wasn't a question. No, there were no documents. There was no spill. There was just a man with too much power testing whether a woman with too little would let him abuse it. Chloe felt tears threaten again, but this time they carried different weight. Not humiliation or rage, but something closer to relief. Why? She whispered. Why tell me the truth now? Damon was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the cleaning crew's preparations. Because in 18 years of testing people, you're the first one who chose dignity over survival. And because my mother would have slapped me too. He moved toward the aircraft door, then stopped one final time. Your job is safe. I'll make sure of that. And Ms. Martinez? Your mother is lucky to have someone willing to fight for what matters. Then he was gone, disappearing into the controlled chaos of Miami International Airport, leaving Chloe alone with the echoes of everything that had just changed. She sank into the nearest passenger seat, her professional composure finally cracking completely. The tears came then, hot and honest, carrying months of suppressed fear and exhaustion and the strange, impossible awareness that maybe, just maybe, dignity was something she could afford to keep after all. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. How was the flight, Mija? Chloe wiped her eyes and typed back. Asterisk different than I expected. I'll tell you everything when I get home. Asterisk. Good different or bad different. She looked around the empty cabin, at the seats where everything had changed, at the galley where she'd made the choice to fight back. I'm not sure yet, she typed. But I think. Good different. Outside the aircraft windows, the Miami sun painted everything in shades of gold and possibility. For the first time in months, Chloe allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, some storms were worth weathering. Miami International Airport. Terminal Concourse. 5:45 p.m. Chloe pulled her coral uniform blazer tighter as she walked through the terminal. The air conditioning hit differently after the controlled atmosphere of the aircraft. Around her, travelers dragged wheeled luggage toward gates, their conversations mixing Spanish, English, and a dozen other languages into the familiar symphony of international travel. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from her supervisor at Elite Aviation Services. The reckoning was coming, apology or no apology. Billionaires could change their minds as easily as they changed their clothes. She found a quiet corner near Gate 23 and dialed back. "Chloe." "Thank God." Jennifer Walsh's voice carried the particular stress of someone managing crisis control. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened on that flight." "There was an incident." "An incident?" "Mr. Washington's office called 20 minutes ago. They're requesting you specifically for his return flight to New York tomorrow morning." His assistant said, and I quote, "Ms. Martinez provided exceptional service under challenging circumstances." Chloe nearly dropped the phone. "He what?" "You're being requested by name. By a billionaire. Do you have any idea what this means for our company? For your career?" Jennifer's excitement was palpable through the connection. "Whatever you did, you impressed the hell out of him." Through the terminal windows, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The weather app on Chloe's phone showed a severe thunderstorm warning for South Florida, with potential delays lasting through midnight. "Jennifer, I need to ask you something. If I turned down the request, would I still have a job?" Silence stretched across the connection. "Chloe, this is a career-making opportunity. Why would you even consider? Would I still have a job?" "Yes. Of course. But honey, you'd be crazy to walk away from this. Mr. Washington could open doors for you that most flight attendants never even see." Chloe ended the call and stared at her reflection in the terminal window. The woman looking back wore a rumpled coral uniform and carried the weight of impossible choices. Behind her reflection, lightning split the darkening sky. Her mother's medical bills weren't going anywhere. Neither was the foreclosure notice. And now she had a chance to secure her future with one of the most powerful men in the country. The same man she'd slapped 6 hours ago. The Marriott Miami Airport. Hotel lobby. 7:30 p.m. The hotel lobby buzzed with the controlled chaos of stranded travelers. The storm had grounded all flights out of Miami until morning, trapping passengers in a limbo of delayed schedules and rearranged plans. Chloe sat in a corner chair, still wearing her uniform, watching CNN weather reports on the lobby television. The meteorologist gestured at a massive storm system covering most of the southeastern United States. "This is a significant weather event, folks. We're looking at potential flight delays through tomorrow afternoon." Small world. She looked up to find Damon Washington standing beside her chair. He'd changed from his royal blue sweater into dark jeans and a simple white button-down shirt. Without the formal attire, he looked younger, more approachable. The red mark on his cheek had faded to a barely visible shadow. "Mr. Washington." She started to stand, but he gestured for her to remain seated. "Damon. And may I?" He indicated the empty chair across from her. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He settled into the chair with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to making himself at home anywhere. "I hear you've been requested for tomorrow's flight," he said. "You hear correctly." Chloe met his gaze directly. "Though I'm not sure why. Because good service is hard to find." "Is that what you call what happened today? Good service?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I call it honest service. Which is rarer than you might think." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching harried travelers negotiate with desk clerks about room availability. The storm outside painted the lobby windows with sheets of rain. "Are you staying here tonight?" Damon asked. Chloe glanced toward the registration desk, where a line of frustrated passengers waited for rooms that probably didn't exist. "I'm hoping to. If they have anything available." "They don't?" I asked. Storm caught everyone off guard. He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "I have a suite upstairs. 2 bedrooms. Full living area. You're welcome to take the second room." The offer hung between them like a live wire. Chloe felt heat creep up her neck. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't think that would be appropriate." "Because you slapped me? Because you're a passenger and I'm crew? Because there are rules about fraternization? Because 6 hours ago you were threatening to destroy my career. All valid points. Damon leaned forward, his expression serious. Let me add another perspective. It's nearly 8 p.m., the hotel is booked solid, and the airport is shutting down overnight maintenance. You can spend the night in an uncomfortable terminal chair, or you can take a proper room where you can rest before tomorrow's flight. As if summoned by his words, a hotel clerk's voice echoed across the lobby. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to announce that we are completely booked for the evening. The front desk can provide a list of area hotels, but please be aware that most accommodations in the Miami area are experiencing similar capacity issues due to the weather emergency. A collective groan rose from the stranded travelers. Families with small children looked particularly defeated. Chloe watched a mother trying to comfort her crying toddler while her husband called hotel after hotel on his phone. The mathematics of exhaustion played out across a dozen faces around the lobby. This isn't about what happened on the plane, Damon said quietly. This is about the fact that you need somewhere to sleep, and I have space to offer. No strings, no expectations, no tests. Just basic human decency. She studied his face, looking for the calculating edge that had driven her to violence earlier. Instead, she found something that looked like sincerity. Why? She asked. Why help me? Because my mother raised me better than I showed you today. Because everyone deserves a decent place to rest. And because... He paused, running his hand through his dark hair. Because I've spent so many years assuming the worst about people that I forgot what it looked like when someone surprised me. Thunder rolled across the Miami sky, rattling the lobby windows. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Separate bedrooms? Chloe asked. Completely separate. You'd have your own bathroom, your own space. I'll probably be working most of the night anyway. She thought about Rosa, probably watching the weather reports and worrying. About the foreclosure notice sitting in her purse. About the strange twist of fate that had brought her from slapping this man to sharing storm shelter with him. Okay, she said finally. But I pay for my half. Chloe. I pay for my half, or I sleep in the terminal. Non-negotiable. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. Though for the record, the company's covering all weather-related expenses. So technically you're not paying me. You're paying Elite Aviation Services. Despite everything, she felt herself smile. That's a very fine distinction. I'm good at fine distinctions. It's how I made my first million. Suite 2847, 9:15 p.m. The suite was exactly as advertised. 2 separate bedrooms flanking a spacious living area with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the storm. Lightning illuminated the Miami skyline in stark, dramatic flashes. Chloe claimed the bedroom on the left, grateful for the privacy to finally change out of her uniform. The hotel had provided emergency toiletries and a comfortable cotton robe. For the first time in 12 hours, she felt human again. When she emerged from her room, she found Damon at the dining table, laptop open, surrounded by papers and financial documents. He'd ordered room service. Enough food for 4 people spread across the table. I wasn't sure what you liked, he said without looking up from his screen. So I got options. The spread included grilled salmon, pasta primavera, chicken Caesar salad, fresh fruit, and 3 different desserts. The aroma made Chloe's stomach clench with sudden hunger. She realized she hadn't eaten since the morning coffee with Rosa. You didn't have to do this. I was ordering anyway. Besides, I owe you dinner. You owe me dinner? Damon looked up from his laptop, and she saw exhaustion in his dark eyes. I made you miss your meal break today. With my test. The least I can do is feed you properly. They ate in relative silence, the storm providing a dramatic soundtrack outside the windows. Chloe found herself stealing glances at this version of Damon Washington. Sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, hair slightly mussed from running his fingers through it. Without the armor of formal business attire, he looked less like an untouchable billionaire and more like a tired man working late into the night. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Why do you test people? He set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. Because I've been burned before. Badly. When you have money, people tell you what they think you want to hear. They smile and agree and compliment you, and you never know if they actually like you or if they just like your bank account. So you hurt them first. To see if they'll let you. To see who they really are when something's at stake. He met her eyes across the table. Most people choose the money. And the ones who don't. You're the first one who didn't. The admission settled between them with surprising weight. Outside, thunder rumbled closer, and the lights dimmed momentarily. My turn, Damon said. Why did you really hit me? Not the surface reason. The real reason. Chloe considered deflecting, maintaining the professional distance she'd been trained to keep. Instead, she found herself telling the truth. Because you reminded me of everyone who's ever made me feel small. Every boss who treated me like I was disposable, every customer who acted like I was invisible, every person who assumed that because I serve others, I don't deserve respect. She paused, gathering courage. And because I was tired of apologizing for taking up space in the world. Your father, Damon said quietly. You mentioned he died fixing air conditioners. Heart attack at 52. He knew something was wrong for weeks, but we couldn't afford for him to take time off work. Couldn't afford the medical bills if they found something serious. Chloe's voice caught. He died because he was too afraid of the cost of living to stop working long enough to save his life. And now you're facing the same choice with your mother. It wasn't a question. Chloe nodded, not trusting herself to speak. How much? Damon asked. What? How much do you owe? For her treatment, for everything. Chloe shook her head. I'm not telling you that. Why not? Because then this becomes about money. And what happened today, what's happening now, it's not about money. Damon studied her across the table. What is it about? Before she could answer, the lights went out completely. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting the suite in dim amber shadows. Outside the windows, Miami had disappeared into darkness. Power's out across the city, Damon said, checking his phone. Could be hours before it's restored. They were alone in the darkness. Two people who'd started the day as strangers and ended it sharing storm shelter. The proximity felt different now, charged with possibilities neither of them had expected. This day has been full of surprises, Chloe said softly. Good surprises or bad surprises? She thought about the question, about the slap and the apology, about dignity and survival, about the strange comfort of sitting in the dark with a man who'd managed to surprise her at every turn. I'm not sure yet, she said. Ask me tomorrow. Do you think Chloe and Damon are beginning to see past their first impressions? What would you do if you were trapped in a storm with someone you'd just met under such intense circumstances? Let me know in the comments. Your insights always add so much to these stories. Lightning illuminated the suite one more time, and in that brief moment of clarity, both of them realized that whatever happened next would change everything they thought they knew about trust, power, and the unexpected places where understanding could take root. Suite 2847, 11:47 p.m. The emergency lighting cast long shadows across the hotel suite. Outside, the storm had settled into a steady rhythm of rain against glass, punctuated by distant thunder. Power remained out across most of Miami, transforming the usually glittering skyline into a canvas of darkness. Chloe sat cross-legged on the living room sofa, wrapped in the hotel robe, watching Damon pace near the windows. His phone had been buzzing constantly for the past hour. Emergency board meetings, delayed acquisitions, investors nervous about weather-related disruptions to his Miami real estate project. The Henderson deal is worth $40 million, he said into the phone, his voice tight with frustration. If they want to walk because of a thunderstorm, then they weren't serious partners to begin with. He ended the call and immediately answered another. Jennifer, I don't care what the stock price does overnight. We're not making panic decisions based on weather delays. His free hand rubbed his temple. Move the Singapore conference call to Friday. Push the Seattle meetings to next week. Just handle it. Chloe watched him field crisis after crisis with the efficiency of someone accustomed to being the final decision-maker on everything. The weight of constant responsibility was visible in the tension across his shoulders, in the way his jaw clenched with each new problem. When his phone finally went quiet, she spoke softly. "Doesn't it ever get exhausting? Being responsible for everything all the time?" Damon turned from the window, surprise flickering across his face, as if he'd forgotten she was there. "It's what I built," he said simply. "Companies don't run themselves." "That's not what I asked." He studied her for a moment, then moved to the chair across from her. In the dim light, the sharp edges of his public persona seemed softer, more human. "Yes," he said finally. "Sometimes it's exhausting. But the alternative is depending on other people to handle things that matter. And in my experience, people let you down when the stakes are high enough." "All people. Most people." Chloe pulled her knees up to her chest, considering her next words carefully. "What happened to make you so certain of that?" Damon was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. "I was 19. Just started my first company with my roommate from community college, Kevin Porter. We'd been friends since we were kids in Detroit. Grew up 3 blocks apart. Both of us poor, both of us hungry to build something better." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. The company was a simple concept. Software to help small businesses manage their inventory. Nothing revolutionary but solid. We worked 18-hour days for 2 years, living on ramen noodles and hope. When Microsoft offered to buy us for $50 million, it felt like we'd won the lottery. But Kevin had been talking to them behind my back for months. Had negotiated a separate deal where he'd stay on as division head while I'd be bought out completely. Microsoft got our software and Kevin's expertise. Kevin got a guaranteed job and ongoing royalties. I got a check and a polite dismissal. Chloe felt her chest tighten. "Your best friend sold you out." "My best friend, my business partner, the person I trusted with everything I'd worked for." Damon's laugh held no humor. "The worst part? He genuinely believed he was doing me a favor. Told me I wasn't cut out for corporate politics, that I'd be happier starting fresh. Said I should thank him for protecting me from a world I didn't understand." "What did you do?" "I took the money and started over. Built 3 more companies over the next decade, each one bigger than the last. Made sure I never needed a partner again, never had to trust anyone else with my future." His eyes met hers across the dim space. "I learned to test people before they could hurt me." The pieces clicked into place for Chloe. The manufactured crisis on the plane, the impossible situation he'd created, the way he'd pushed her to see if she'd sacrifice her principles for security. "You were testing whether I'd be Kevin Porter," she said quietly. "I was testing whether you'd tell me what you thought I wanted to hear, or what you actually believed. And when I slapped you, I realized I'd been asking the wrong question." Damon ran his hand through his hair. "I wasn't testing your character. I was testing whether you'd let me abuse your character. There's a difference." Thunder rolled across the Miami sky, closer now. The storm was intensifying rather than passing, promising hours more of forced intimacy in their emergency-lit sanctuary. Chloe's phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. "Power's out here too, Mija. Hospital has generators, so don't worry. How are you doing in Miami?" She stared at the message, then at Damon sitting across from her. A man who'd built walls to protect himself from betrayal, just as she'd built walls to protect herself from disappointment. "My turn," she said, setting the phone aside. "You want to know why I really can't let you pay my mother's medical bills?" "Because you don't trust my motives." "Because I don't trust anyone's motives. Not anymore." Chloe pulled the hotel robe tighter around herself. 3 years ago I was engaged. To a man named Trevor Hamilton. Investment advisor, beautiful smile, said all the right things about building a future together. Damon's expression shifted, becoming more attentive. My father had just died. Mom was struggling with the grief, and I was trying to hold everything together while planning a wedding and working 2 jobs. Trevor was incredibly supportive. Insisted on helping with the finances, taking over the bills so I could focus on family. Her voice caught slightly, but she pushed forward. He took over the bills, all right. Took over our bank accounts, our credit, everything. When I found out he'd been using Mom's social security number to open credit lines, using Dad's death benefits to cover his gambling debts, I confronted him. What did he say? That I was being dramatic. That couples share finances, and I should be grateful he was handling the complicated stuff so I didn't have to worry about it. Chloe's hands clenched into fists. Turned out he'd been doing the same thing to his previous girlfriend. And the one before that. I was just the latest woman stupid enough to trust a man who made me feel taken care of. How much did he steal? Everything. Dad's life insurance, Mom's savings, my college fund that I'd been rebuilding. About $60,000 total. She met his eyes. Which is why Mom's treatment bills are my problem to solve. Why I can't accept help from anyone, even someone who seems genuine. Because I've been wrong about seeming genuine before. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Two people who'd been wounded by trust, sitting in emergency lighting, recognizing their own scars reflected in each other. You realize we're both pretty damaged, Damon said finally. I prefer the term experienced. Despite everything, he smiled. That's a more optimistic way to look at it. I have to be optimistic. The alternative is giving up, and I can't do that while Mom's still fighting. Damon was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd told him. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. What if I told you there was a way to help with your mother's treatment that had nothing to do with charity or owing me anything? I'd say you're about to make an offer that sounds too good to be true. Probably. He leaned forward. But hear me out. My company has been looking for someone to head up our new employee wellness program. Someone who understands what it's like to worry about medical bills, who can design benefits that actually help people instead of just looking good on paper. Chloe felt her pulse quicken. Damon. The position comes with full medical coverage for family members, retroactive to the date of hire, which would cover existing conditions. The salary is competitive, and more importantly, the work would matter. You'd be helping thousands of people avoid the kind of financial crisis you're facing now. It was exactly what she needed. Too exactly. Why are you offering me this? Because you're qualified. Because you understand the problems we're trying to solve. And because... He paused, seeming to weigh his words. Because 6 months ago, I buried myself in work instead of dealing with the fact that success doesn't mean anything if you're living it alone. Today, you reminded me that some things are more important than protecting yourself from being hurt. The lights flickered once, then came back on fully. The suite was suddenly bright, almost harsh after hours of dimness. Chloe blinked in the sudden illumination, seeing Damon clearly for the first time since the power had failed. He looked vulnerable in the full light. Tired. Human. This isn't about the slap, she said. Or about guilt. No. It's about the fact that you chose dignity over security, and that's exactly the kind of person I want representing my company to employees who need someone to fight for them. Her phone buzzed again. Rosa. The nurses are talking about the storm. Stay safe tonight, okay? I love you. Chloe looked at the message, then at Damon, then out at the Miami skyline now glittering with restored power. The storm was passing, but the choices made in its shelter would outlast the weather. If I said yes, she said carefully, what would happen between us? I don't know, Damon admitted, but I'd like to find out. If you're willing to take that risk. With someone who tests people for a living? With someone who's ready to stop testing and start trusting. Outside the suite windows, Miami sparkled with renewed life. Inside, two people sat surrounded by the debris of their defenses, wondering if courage was something you could rebuild from broken pieces. The storm was ending. But for Chloe Martinez and Damon Washington, the real weather was just beginning. Suite 2847, Thursday, October 16, 2024, 2:33 a.m. The power had been restored for over an hour, but neither Chloe nor Damon had moved to turn on the harsh overhead lights. The soft glow from table lamps created a cocoon of warmth in the suite's living area, holding the intimacy of their storm shelter confessions. Chloe sat curled on the sofa, feet tucked beneath her, studying Damon's face as he scrolled through something on his phone. The job offer hung between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. "Show me," she said suddenly. "Show you what?" "The employee wellness program. What it actually looks like." Damon set his phone aside and opened his laptop. "Fair warning, this is going to sound like a sales pitch. I've heard worse sales pitches. Trust me." He turned the screen so she could see. Charts and graphs filled the display, but behind the corporate formatting, Chloe could see something genuinely innovative. "We started with a simple question," Damon said, his voice taking on the focused energy she'd seen glimpses of during his business calls. "Why do good employees leave?" The answer wasn't salary or benefits in the traditional sense. It was fear. Fear of one medical emergency destroying their finances. Fear of choosing between taking care of family and keeping their job. Chloe leaned closer to read the screen. Mental health coverage with no co-pays? Full coverage. Therapy, counseling, crisis intervention. No questions asked, no approval needed. He clicked to the next slide. Emergency family leave that's actually paid. Childcare assistance that doesn't require you to jump through bureaucratic hoops. And medical coverage that treats cancer like the disease it is, not like a luxury expense. She scrolled through testimonials from employees. A single father whose daughter's epilepsy was fully covered. A woman whose husband's depression treatment didn't cost them their house. Story after story of people whose lives had been saved by benefits that treated them like human beings rather than profit margins. "This is incredible," Chloe whispered. "How many companies are doing this?" "Not enough. Which is why I need someone who understands what it's like to choose between medical bills and groceries. Someone who can design programs based on real need, not corporate assumptions about what employees want." Chloe looked up from the screen to find him watching her intently. "You really think I could do this?" "I think you're the only person I've met who could do this authentically, without losing sight of why it matters." The weight of possibility settled over her. Not just a job, but work that meant something. Work that could prevent other families from facing the choices hers had been forced to make. "What's the catch?" she asked. "There's always a catch. The catch is that you'd be working for me. With me. And after today, that gets complicated." "Complicated how?" Damon closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. "Because I'm attracted to you, Chloe. Because what happened on that plane, what's happening here tonight, it's not just about recognizing shared damage. It's about wanting to know what's possible when two people stop protecting themselves long enough to actually see each other." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and unguarded. "That's definitely complicated," Chloe said softly. "It doesn't have to be. The job offer is legitimate regardless of anything personal. You could work remotely, report to my VP of Human Resources instead of directly to me. We could keep it completely professional." "Is that what you want? To keep it professional?" "No," he said without hesitation. "But I want you to have choices that aren't influenced by what I want." Chloe stood and moved to the windows, looking out at Miami's restored lights. The storm clouds were clearing, revealing stars between breaks in the cover. "Can I tell you something?" she said without turning around. "When I was 17, I had this plan. Nursing school, working in pediatric oncology, helping kids fight the same disease that eventually took my grandmother. I had it all mapped out. What happened? Life happened. Dad's hours got cut, Mom needed surgery. Bills piled up faster than I could work part-time jobs to pay them. I dropped out after one semester to take a full-time position at the airport." She pressed her palm against the cool glass. "I've spent the last 11 years serving other people's dreams while mine collected dust. That doesn't mean they're gone. Doesn't it?" She turned to face him. "I'm 28 years old, Damon. I haven't been in school in over a decade. Even if your job offer solved the financial problems, even if Mom beat the cancer completely, how do you go back to dreams you abandoned when you were barely an adult?" Damon stood and moved to stand beside her at the window, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his skin. You don't go back, he said quietly. You go forward. With everything you've learned, everything you've survived, everything that's made you who you are now. Who am I now? Someone who slaps billionaires when they forget their humanity. Someone who chooses dignity over security. Someone who understands what it means to fight for people you love. His fingers brushed hers on the window glass. Someone worth knowing. The touch sent electricity up her arm. When she turned to look at him, she found his face inches from hers, his dark eyes searching her expression for permission. This is crazy, she whispered. Probably. We met 12 hours ago. Feels longer. You tested me. I slapped you. Now we're talking about jobs and feelings and... Instead of answering, she reached up and traced the faded mark on his cheek with her fingertip. His breath caught at the contact. Does it hurt? She asked. No. But it should. What I did to you today should have consequences. Maybe it does. Maybe the consequence is that you have to live with knowing you found someone who won't let you hide behind your money. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm flat against his cheek. What are you doing to me, Chloe Martinez? I don't know. What are you doing to me, Damon Washington? The space between them disappeared. His lips found hers in a kiss that tasted like possibility and risk, like the end of loneliness and the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. That definitely complicates the job offer, Chloe said. We could pretend it didn't happen. Could we? Probably not. She laughed, the sound surprising them both. When was the last time she'd laughed about something that mattered? When was the last time anything had felt this simultaneously terrifying and right? I need to call my mother, she said suddenly. Now. It's almost 3 in the morning. She's awake. Chemo insomnia. And she always said if something important happened, I should tell her right away, no matter what time it was. This is important. Chloe looked at him standing in the lamplight, hair mussed from her fingers, lips slightly swollen from their kiss, eyes holding a vulnerability she was beginning to recognize as his real face beneath all the careful control. Yeah, she said softly. This is important. She moved to the sofa and picked up her phone. Rosa answered on the first ring. Mija. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Mama. Something's different. Different how? Are you safe? I'm safe. I'm in Miami, grounded by the storm, and I think. She looked at Damon, who was listening without trying to hide it. I think I might have found something I didn't know I was looking for. A job. Maybe. A job and maybe something else. Rosa was quiet for a moment. Tell me about the something else. His name is Damon Washington. He's brilliant and complicated, and he made me remember that I'm allowed to want more than just survival. Is he good to you? Chloe thought about the manufactured crisis, the apology, the job offer, the way he'd offered shelter without expectation, the kiss that had tasted like honesty. He's trying to be. We're both trying to figure out what that looks like. Good. Trying is important. Your father tried every day to be good to us, even when it was hard. Mama, what if I told you there was a chance to fix everything? The bills, the treatment, all of it. I'd say be careful of chances that sound too good to be true. But what if it wasn't too good to be true? What if it was just good? Rosa's laugh carried across the phone connection. Warm and knowing. Then I'd say your father was right. Love finds a way through any storm. After ending the call, Chloe found Damon watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Love? He asked quietly. Heat flooded her cheeks. My mother has a romantic view of everything. Does she? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to name. Ask me again tomorrow, Chloe said finally. After we land in New York? After we figure out if this feeling survives daylight. Damon nodded slowly. Fair enough. But Chloe? Yeah. Whatever happens with the job, whatever happens between us, today changed something. For both of us. She looked at this man who'd started the day as an adversary and ended it as something she couldn't yet define. Tomorrow would bring decisions about employment and trust, about risk and reward, about whether two damaged people could build something whole together. But tonight, in the soft lamplight of a Miami hotel suite, surrounded by the debris of their defenses and the possibility of something real, it was enough to know that neither of them wanted to face whatever came next alone. "Yeah," she said softly. It did. Teterboro Airport. Friday, October 17, 2024, 10:15 a.m. The Gulfstream G650 sat gleaming on the tarmac, engines warming for the flight to New York. Morning sunlight streamed through the aircraft windows, a stark contrast to the storm-darkened intimacy of the previous night. Chloe stood at the galley mirror, adjusting her coral uniform for what felt like the 100th time. The same mirror where she'd checked her appearance 24 hours ago, but everything had changed. The woman looking back at her carried herself differently. Straighter. Like someone who'd remembered what it felt like to be seen. The Miami layover had transformed from professional obligation to personal revelation. She'd woken in the hotel suite's second bedroom to find coffee and fresh pastries waiting, along with a note from Damon. "Good morning." No expectations, no pressure. Just gratitude for last night. D. The flight back to New York was scheduled to be simple. Just Damon, no other passengers, no tests, no manufactured crises. A chance to see how their connection translated from storm shelter intimacy to the clarity of day. "Morning, Chloe." Captain Rodriguez appeared in the galley doorway, coffee mug in hand. "Ready for a nice, boring flight home?" "More than ready," she replied, meaning it. "Good. Our passenger's already aboard, by the way. Been on his phone for the past 20 minutes. Some kind of emergency meeting situation." Through the galley entrance, Chloe could see Damon in his usual seat, but the relaxed man from last night had been replaced by the controlled businessman she'd first encountered. Royal blue suit instead of casual clothes, tablet and phone both active, his attention completely absorbed by whatever crisis required management. She approached his seat with a coffee service, professional distance carefully maintained despite the memory of his hands in her hair, his lips against hers. "Good morning, Mr. Washington." "Coffee." He looked up, and for a moment, his business mask slipped. The warmth in his eyes reminded her of the man who'd kissed her by the hotel window. "Good morning. Coffee would be perfect, thank you." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the cup, and electricity shot between them just as it had in the lamplight 12 hours ago. "Everything all right?" she asked quietly. "Board meeting moved up to this afternoon. Some concerns about the Singapore expansion." His voice carried the weight of someone juggling multiple crises. "Nothing that can't be handled. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez. We've been cleared for takeoff. Flight time to Teterboro will be approximately 2 hours and 40 minutes. Chloe returned to the galley and secured herself for takeoff, watching through the small window as Miami disappeared beneath them. Somewhere in that sprawling city was the hotel suite where they'd shared stories and vulnerabilities, where the possibility of something real had taken root. 1 hour into flight, 11:30 a.m. Damon had been in constant communication since takeoff. Phone calls, video conferences, rapid-fire text exchanges with his executive team. Chloe served him lunch he barely touched, refilled coffee he drank absently, watched him navigate corporate warfare with the efficiency of someone who'd built an empire one decision at a time. His phone rang again. This time, his entire posture changed. "Jennifer, what do you mean they want to see a background check?" His voice carried a sharp edge Chloe hadn't heard since the manufactured crisis yesterday. "On who?" "The flight attendant." Chloe's blood went cold. She pressed herself against the galley wall, straining to hear. "I don't care what the board thinks about security protocols. We're not running background checks on service staff unless there's a legitimate reason." Damon's voice rose slightly. "What reason? What exactly are they concerned about?" A long pause. Chloe could hear the tinny sound of Jennifer's voice through the phone, but couldn't make out words. "She what?" Damon's tone went deadly quiet. "Say that again." Slowly. Another pause. Longer this time. "How did the board find out about an incident that wasn't reported?" His voice was ice. "Who told them?" Chloe's hands began to shake. "The incident. The slap. Somehow, word had reached his board of directors. Marcus Chen called whom? When? Damon stood abruptly, pacing toward the aircraft's rear section. He told them what exactly? Through the galley entrance, Chloe could see him running his free hand through his hair, the controlled businessman facade cracking under pressure. Violence. He described it as violence. Damon's voice carried disbelief and growing anger. Jennifer, I need you to listen very carefully. Cancel the background check. Cancel any investigation. And get me Marcus Chen on the phone immediately. He ended the call and immediately placed another. Marcus, it's Damon. We need to talk. Now. His voice was controlled fury. What exactly did you tell my board about yesterday's flight? Chloe couldn't hear Marcus's response, but Damon's reaction told the story. Unprovoked assault? Are you out of your mind? He was no longer trying to keep his voice down. You were there, Marcus. You saw what happened. That wasn't assault, that was. He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes finding Chloe in the galley doorway. For a moment, they stared at each other across the cabin. She saw the exact instant he realized she'd been listening. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, ending the conversation without waiting for a response. How much did you hear? He asked quietly. Enough. Her voice came out steady despite the earthquake happening in her chest. Your board thinks I attacked you. Marcus Chen is an idiot who's trying to cover his own embarrassment by making you look like the problem. And you're conducting damage control. Chloe, that's not. You're having me investigated. The words came out flat, emotionless. Background check, board discussions, security protocols. All because I slapped you. I'm not having you investigated. I specifically told them not to. But they want to. Your people, your board, your company. They want to make sure the violent flight attendant isn't a threat to their precious billionaire. Damon moved toward her, his expression desperate. That's not how I see what happened. But it's how they see it. And in the end, that's what matters, isn't it? What your board thinks, what your investors believe, what looks good for the company. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with horrible clarity. The job offer, the attraction, the night of intimacy and possibility. All of it now tainted by the knowledge that she was being discussed in boardrooms as a security risk. The job offer, she said quietly. Was that real, or was that you trying to control the situation? Of course it was real. Chloe, you have to believe. I don't have to believe anything. Her professional mask was back in place, armor against the pain threatening to overwhelm her. I'm service staff who stepped out of line. You're a billionaire who can't afford the publicity of having his employees investigated for violence. Stop. Damon's voice was sharp. Stop doing that. Doing what? Putting yourself back in that box. Making yourself small again. I was never out of the box. The words exploded from her with surprising force. I was never anything more than the help who forgot her place. Last night, the storm, all of it, it was just... She struggled for the words. It was just wealthy guilt and proximity and circumstances that won't survive the real world. You don't believe that, don't I? Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. Your own board is treating me like a criminal, Damon. They're running background checks because they think I'm dangerous. How exactly is that supposed to make me feel safe taking a job with your company? Because I won't let them. You won't let them what? Be concerned about their investment? Protect their interests? You're the CEO, but you're not the only one making decisions. Damon was quiet for a long moment, and she could see him processing the implications of what she was saying. The job offer that had seemed like salvation now looked like corporate liability management. The personal connection that had felt like destiny now felt like a powerful man's attempt to control a potentially damaging situation. What do you want me to do? He asked finally. I want you to be honest with me. Not CEO honest, not damage control honest. Actually honest. She met his eyes directly. If your board threatens to vote you out unless you distance yourself from the violent flight attendant, What choice do you make? The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Chloe watched Damon's face, saw him calculating, weighing, considering. Saw the exact moment when the businessman reasserted control over the man who'd kissed her in hotel lamplight. It won't come to that, he said finally. But if it did. His silence was answer enough. Chloe nodded, something cold and final settling in her chest. Captain Rodriguez, this is Chloe. Could you please radio ahead and request ground transportation for me upon landing? I won't be continuing with Elite Aviation Services after today. Damon's eyes went wide. Chloe, don't. Don't what? Don't quit the job where I'm considered a security risk? Don't walk away from the man who can't promise he'll choose me over his board of directors. You're not being fair. I'm being realistic. She turned toward the galley, needing distance from the wreckage of whatever they'd built. Which is something I should have been from the beginning. So that's it. One phone call from a board member you've never met, and you're walking away from everything. Chloe turned back to face him, and this time she didn't hide the pain in her eyes. I'm walking away from the illusion that any of this was real. The job, the connection, the possibility that someone like you could see someone like me as anything more than a problem to be managed. You know that's not true. Do I? Because right now, all I know is that I'm being investigated by your security team while you offer me jobs and talk about trust. All I know is that Marcus Chen can make one phone call and turn me from potential girlfriend into potential liability. The words hung in the cabin air, brutal and honest. I trusted you, she whispered. Last night, I actually trusted you. And this morning I find out your company is running background checks on me because I'm apparently violent and unpredictable. I'm going to fix this. No, you're not. Because you can't fix the fact that your world and mine don't actually fit together. You can't fix the fact that I'll always be the employee who stepped out of line, and you'll always be the boss who has to choose between his personal desires and his professional responsibilities. Chloe returned to the galley and began the mechanical process of securing equipment for landing. Behind her, she could hear Damon making phone calls, his voice tense with damage control and corporate firefighting. But she wasn't listening anymore. The woman who'd woken up this morning believing in possibilities had been replaced by someone older, wiser, and infinitely more alone. Some storms, she realized, didn't clear the air. Sometimes they just showed you how fragile your shelter really was. The aircraft began its descent toward Teterboro, carrying them back to the world where billionaires had boards of directors and flight attendants knew their place. But in the space between them, something that had felt like love was dying of complications neither of them had anticipated. And this time, there was no storm to blame for the destruction. Teterboro Airport, Private Aviation Terminal, 1:45 p.m. The Gulfstream G650 sat silent on the tarmac, engines cooling in the October afternoon sun. Ground crews moved with efficient precision, unloading luggage and preparing the aircraft for its next assignment. Just another routine flight completed, no different from thousands of others. Except everything was different. Chloe stood in the terminal bathroom, staring at her reflection in the harsh fluorescent lighting. The woman looking back wore the same coral uniform she'd put on that morning in Miami, but the hope in her eyes from 24 hours ago had been replaced by something harder, more familiar. The armor was back in place. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from Elite Aviation Services. Word traveled fast in the private aviation world, and her resignation mid-flight had created exactly the kind of disruption that made supervisors nervous. She didn't answer. Instead, she dialed a different number. Queens Medical Center, Rosa Martinez's room. Mama. It's me. Mija. You're back from Miami. How did it go? The simple question hit harder than Chloe had expected. How did it go? She'd slapped a billionaire, spent a storm-soaked night falling for him, then watched their connection crumble under the weight of corporate politics and class reality. It was complicated, she said finally. Complicated good or complicated bad? Just complicated. Chloe closed her eyes, leaning against the bathroom wall. Mama, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Always. If I told you there was a way to pay for all your treatment to save the house, to fix everything, but it meant working for someone who might not respect me the way I deserve, Would you want me to take it? Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Mija, where is this coming from? Just answer the question. Please. No, Rosa said firmly. I would not want you to take it. Even if it meant losing the house? Even if it meant we couldn't afford the treatment? Especially then. Rosa's voice carried the steel that had gotten her through 20 years of housekeeping, through her husband's death, through cancer diagnosis and treatment. Your father and I didn't sacrifice everything so you could spend your life accepting less than you're worth. Tears burned behind Chloe's eyes. But what if I can't fix this on my own? What if I'm not strong enough? You slapped a billionaire on his own airplane, Mija. You think you're not strong enough. Despite everything, Chloe almost smiled. How did you? Vanessa Chen called her mother, who called her friend Patricia, who apparently tells everyone everything. The story is all over the social circles by now. Great. So I'm unemployed and infamous. You're unemployed and brave. There's a difference. Manhattan, Washington Industries headquarters, 2:30 p.m. 47 floors above Madison Avenue, Damon Washington sat at the head of a mahogany conference table, facing 8 members of his board of directors. The same room where he'd made the decisions that built his empire, where he'd fought battles for market share and corporate control. But he'd never fought a battle like this one. The incident represents a significant liability exposure, board member Patricia Holbrook was saying, her voice carrying the particular authority of someone who'd never worried about a paycheck. An employee physically assaulting the CEO opens us up to lawsuit claims, insurance complications, and public relations disasters. She's not our employee, Damon said quietly. She works for Elite Aviation Services. A vendor relationship doesn't insulate us from liability if their staff becomes violent on our aircraft. Marcus Chen leaned forward from across the table. Damon, I understand you want to be charitable about this, but what I witnessed was unprovoked assault. The woman struck you across the face in front of multiple witnesses. There's no corporate policy that makes that acceptable. Damon studied the faces around the table. People he'd worked with for years, who'd helped build the company from a startup to a multi-billion-dollar empire. People whose judgment he'd trusted on countless decisions. People who'd never been broke, never been desperate, never had to choose between dignity and survival. Marcus, Damon said, his voice deadly calm. Tell them what you left out of your report. I'm sorry. Tell them about the test. About the fabricated crisis. About the way I systematically humiliated Ms. Martinez for my own entertainment. The boardroom went silent. Marcus's face flushed red above his expensive collar. That's not. The situation was more complex than. Was there or was there not a cranberry juice spill on important documents? Well, no, but. Did I or did I not create a fictional emergency designed to see if Ms. Martinez would sacrifice her principles for job security? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The specific details aren't really relevant to. The specific details are the only thing that's relevant. Damon stood, moving to the windows overlooking the city. I abused my power. I created an impossible situation designed to humiliate an employee. And when she refused to play along, when she chose dignity over employment, she defended herself. Damon, Patricia's voice carried warning. You're describing behavior that could expose the company to even greater liability. I'm describing my behavior, my choices, my responsibility. He turned back to face the board. And now I'm going to make another choice. He moved to his seat at the head of the table but remained standing. I'm withdrawing the Singapore expansion. 8 faces stared at him in shock. The expansion represents 18 months of planning and $400 million in projected revenue, board member Robert Chen protested. It also represents compromising my values to protect market share. I won't build a company that treats people as disposable. Over a flight attendant? Patricia's voice was incredulous. Over the principle that power doesn't give you the right to abuse people who can't fight back. Damon's voice carried finality. Over the realization that we've become exactly the kind of company I swore I'd never build. His phone buzzed with a text. Without thinking, he glanced at it. Mom's doing well today. Thank you for asking about her. I hope you find what you're looking for. Chloe. The message hit him like cold water. Gracious. Kind. Even in her anger, even after everything had fallen apart, she was thinking about his feelings. He looked up to find 8 pairs of eyes watching him. I need to go, he said simply. Damon, we have 3 more agenda items. Handle them without me. Or don't handle them. Right now, I don't care. He was halfway to the door when Patricia's voice stopped him. If you walk out of this meeting to chase after some woman you barely know, the board will have to consider whether you're still capable of making rational decisions in the company's best interest. Damon turned back to face her. Patricia, if I don't walk out of this meeting to fight for someone who reminds me why any of this matters, then I'm definitely not capable of making rational decisions. He left the boardroom and didn't look back. Queens, New York, Elmhurst General Hospital. 4:15 p.m. Chloe sat beside her mother's hospital bed, watching Rosa sleep. The chemo session had been harder than usual, leaving her exhausted and pale despite the cheerful yellow headscarf. The foreclosure notice lay on the bedside table, along with a stack of medical bills that seemed to multiply every time Chloe looked away. Mathematics of desperation written in clinical language and corporate letterhead. Her phone buzzed. Damon's name on the caller ID. She let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again. Same name. She turned the phone face down on the table. Answer it, Rosa said without opening her eyes. I thought you were sleeping. Hard to sleep when your daughter's phone keeps buzzing. Rosa's eyes opened, focusing on Chloe with the clarity that sometimes emerged after chemo fog. Answer it. There's nothing to say. There's always something to say. The question is whether you're brave enough to hear it. Chloe stared at the phone. Everything in her wanted to answer, wanted to hear his voice, wanted to believe that somehow the impossibility of their situation could be resolved with the right words. Everything in her also knew better. What if he hurts me again? What if you hurt yourself by not giving him the chance to try? The phone stopped buzzing. A moment later, it chimed with a voicemail. Listen to it, Rosa said gently. Then decide. With shaking fingers, Chloe accessed the voicemail and pressed it to her ear. Chloe, it's me. I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, and I understand why. But I need you to know something. I just walked out of the most important board meeting of my career. Killed a $400 million deal. Probably destroyed my relationship with half my investors. His voice paused, and she could hear traffic in the background. I did it because a very wise woman once told me that some things are more important than money. Because someone reminded me that dignity isn't negotiable. Because I realized that if I can't protect the people I care about from my own world, then I've built the wrong world. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm driving to Queens right now. I don't know which hospital, but I'll figure it out. I need to see you, need to tell you in person that everything I said last night was real. The job offer was real. My feelings are real. And if my board can't handle me choosing someone who makes me remember why I built this company in the first place, then maybe I need a different board. The message ended. Chloe stared at the phone in her hand, then at her mother, who was watching her with knowing eyes. He's coming here. Sounds like it. What am I supposed to say to him? Rosa reached for her daughter's hand with fingers that were thinner than they used to be but still strong enough to offer comfort. Say what's in your heart, Mija. But say it for yourself, not for him. Not for the money, not for the job, not because you're afraid of being alone. Say it because it's true. And if what's in my heart is that I'm terrified of trusting him again, then tell him that too. Real love isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and choosing each other anyway. Through the hospital room window, Chloe could see the Queens skyline, the modest buildings and working neighborhoods where she'd grown up. Her world. Her people. Her reality. Somewhere out there, a billionaire was driving through unfamiliar streets, looking for her. Ready to fight for something that probably couldn't survive the collision of their two worlds. But maybe, just maybe, worth trying. Her phone buzzed with a text. Elmhurst General Hospital lobby. Room number. Chloe looked at her mother, who squeezed her hand encouragingly. Room 347, she typed back. 3rd floor. Then she waited, heart hammering, for whatever came next. Queen's Medical Center. Room 347. 4:47 p.m. The soft knock on the door came exactly when Chloe expected it, but her heart still jumped. Through the small window, she could see Damon Washington standing in the hospital corridor, looking completely out of place in his royal blue suit among the scrubs and wheelchairs and everyday chaos of Queen's Medical. "Come in," she called softly. He entered hesitantly, carrying a small bouquet of yellow roses that matched Rose's headscarf. His eyes went immediately to her mother, lying pale but alert in the hospital bed. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, approaching the bed with genuine respect. "I'm Damon Washington. I've heard so much about you." Rosa studied him with the sharp assessment of someone who'd spent decades reading people's character in their faces. "So you're the one who's got my daughter all turned around," she said, accepting the flowers with a slight smile. "I'm afraid so, though I'm hoping to turn her right side up again." "That depends. You here to apologize or to make excuses?" Damon glanced at Chloe, who was watching the exchange with nervous fascination. "To apologize. And to ask for a chance I probably don't deserve." Rosa nodded approvingly. "Good answer. Sit down. Both of you. I want to hear this." Damon pulled up a chair beside Chloe's, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his skin. The same proximity that had led to their first kiss in Miami lamplight. "I owe you both an apology," he began, his voice steady but vulnerable. "Chloe, what I did on that plane was unforgivable. I abused my power, tested your character for my own entertainment, and put you in an impossible situation designed to humiliate you." "You already apologized for that," Chloe said quietly. "I'm not finished." He turned to face her directly. "This morning, when my board started treating you like a security threat, I should have shut it down immediately. I should have protected you from their assumptions and their fear. Instead, I let you find out through corporate backchannels that you were being investigated." Rosa made a small sound of disapproval. "I let you believe that our connection was just damage control, that the job offer was corporate manipulation instead of genuine opportunity. I failed you when you needed me to fight for what we'd found together." Chloe felt tears threaten, but kept her voice steady. "What changed? Why are you here now instead of in your boardroom protecting your empire?" "Because I realized that empires are worthless if you build them on the backs of people you claim to care about." Damon reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "This morning after you quit, I did some thinking. About my mother's promise, about the man I wanted to become versus the man I'd actually become." He handed the envelope to Rosa, who opened it with curious fingers. "What is this?" she asked, scanning the documents inside. "Full payment for your cancer treatment. Past, present, and future. Not a loan, not charity, not strings attached. Just a medical bill that shouldn't exist in a civilized society." Chloe's breath caught. "Damon, we can't accept." "It's not for you to accept or reject," he said gently. "It's already done. The hospital's billing department has been paid in full. Your mother's treatment will continue without interruption, without cost, without any involvement from either of you." Rosa stared at the payment confirmation papers, then at Damon. "Young man, this is a lot of money. Mrs. Martinez, with respect, your daughter is worth more to me than any amount of money." "And the job offer?" Chloe asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Still real. Still legitimate. Still yours if you want it." Damon pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. "I've spent the last hour restructuring the employee wellness program as a completely independent division. You'd report directly to the board of directors, not to me. Your decisions, your budget, your authority. No conflicts of interest, no appearance of favoritism." Chloe stared at the organizational chart on his phone. "You created an entire corporate division in one afternoon?" "I created it because I believe in what you could do with it. Because thousands of employees need someone who understands what it's like to choose between medical care and financial survival." His voice grew more intense. Because you're brilliant and compassionate and exactly the kind of person who should be making decisions about people's lives. What about your board? What about the Singapore deal? Damon's expression darkened slightly. The board is learning to adjust their expectations. The Singapore deal was built on exploiting regulatory loopholes that hurt workers. Good riddance. Rosa leaned forward in her hospital bed. And what about my daughter's heart? You've taken care of the money, you've taken care of the job. What about the fact that she's falling in love with you? Heat flooded Chloe's cheeks. Mama. What? It's true. You think I don't see how you look at him? How he looks at you. Rosa's voice carried gentle wisdom. The question is whether you're both brave enough to admit it. Damon turned to face Chloe fully, his dark eyes holding hers with complete honesty. I'm in love with you, he said simply. I love your courage, your integrity, your willingness to fight for what matters. I love the way you slapped me when I forgot my humanity. I love the way you choose dignity over security every single time. Chloe felt her carefully constructed defenses crumble completely. I love how you make me remember why I built this company in the first place, he continued. I love that you see through all the money and power to the person underneath. I love that you make me want to be better than I thought I could be. Damon. She whispered. I know it's complicated. I know there are obstacles, class differences, corporate politics, all kinds of reasons why this might not work. He reached for her hands, and this time she didn't pull away. But I also know that what we found in that storm shelter was real. And I know that I'd rather fail trying to build something authentic with you than succeed at building something empty without you. Tears were flowing freely now, but Chloe didn't care. You walked out of a board meeting for me. I walked out of a board meeting for us. For the possibility that two people who recognize each other's wounds can help each other heal. What if I'm still scared? Then we'll be scared together. But we won't let fear make our choices for us. Rosa cleared her throat gently. Mija, what does your heart tell you? Chloe looked at her mother, lying in the hospital bed with yellow roses in her lap and hope in her eyes. Then she looked at Damon, this complicated, powerful, vulnerable man who'd driven through Queens to find her. My heart tells me, she said slowly, that love isn't about finding someone who makes life easy. It's about finding someone who makes the difficulties worth facing. And that maybe, sometimes, the most unlikely connections are the ones worth fighting for. She leaned forward and kissed him, tasting possibility and promise and the salt of her own tears. When they broke apart, both were smiling through their emotions. So what happens now? She asked. Now we take it one day at a time. You take the job if you want it. I learn how to be in love without being controlling. We figure out how to blend two very different worlds into something that works for both of us. And if your board fires you, then I start over. With you, if you'll have me. Rosa's laugh filled the hospital room. Ay, Mijos, you're both overthinking this. Love is simple. You choose each other every day through whatever comes. Everything else is just details. 6 months later, April 2025. The same Gulfstream G650. Chloe Martinez Washington stood in the aircraft galley, adjusting the coral blazer she'd chosen to wear one last time. Through the main cabin, she could see the wedding guests settling into their seats. Rosa, healthy and radiant in a bright purple dress. Captain Rodriguez, resplendent in his dress uniform. Jennifer Walsh from Elite Aviation, dabbing happy tears. Even Vanessa Chen, now 18 and grinning as she live-streamed the ceremony for her followers. The employee wellness program had launched to incredible success, providing comprehensive medical coverage and support services to over 50,000 workers across Damon's companies. Chloe had testified before Congress about healthcare reform, been featured on magazine covers, and spoken at conferences about dignity in the workplace. But none of that mattered as much as the man waiting for her in the main cabin. Damon stood near the front of the aircraft, wearing a simple navy suit and a smile that had become her favorite sight in the world. His board had initially grumbled about his unconventional priorities, but when the employee wellness program increased productivity by 30% and decreased turnover by 60%, they'd learned to appreciate his judgment. Ready, Mija? Rosa asked, appearing at her elbow in a cloud of gentle perfume. More than ready, Mama. They walked together down the aircraft aisle, past friends and chosen family, toward the man who'd learned that testing people's character was less important than trusting in their inherent goodness. Captain Rodriguez, ordained online for the occasion, beamed at them from behind a makeshift altar. "We are gathered here today," he began, 35,000 feet above the earth, to witness something I've never seen in 25 years of aviation. Two people who found love in the most unlikely circumstances and had the courage to fight for it. Chloe and Damon faced each other, hands joined, surrounded by the gentle hum of engines and the warmth of people who'd chosen to celebrate love over convention. "The vows you've written for each other," Rodriguez continued, "reflect the journey that brought you to this moment." Damon spoke first, his voice steady and sure. "Chloe, you taught me that real strength isn't about having power over others. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable with someone who sees all of you and chooses to stay. You remind me every day that the best parts of myself are the parts that choose love over fear, connection over control, authenticity over image." His thumb traced circles on her hand. "I promise to protect your dreams the way you've protected your dignity. I promise to fight for us when the world tells us we don't fit together. I promise to never again test your character, because I've learned that real trust is a gift you give, not something you earn through trials." Chloe's voice was thick with emotion when she responded. "Damon, you showed me that asking for what I deserve isn't the same as asking for too much. You taught me that some risks are worth taking, even when they scare you. Especially when they scare you." She paused, looking around the cabin at the faces of everyone who'd supported their unlikely journey. "I promise to keep challenging you when you forget that power comes with responsibility. I promise to build something beautiful with you, not despite our different backgrounds, but because of the strength that comes from bringing two worlds together. I promise to choose courage over safety, love over fear, and us over anything that tries to tear us apart. By the power vested in me by the Internet and the state of New York," Rodriguez announced with a grin, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, and try not to slap each other this time." The cabin erupted in laughter and applause as Damon and Chloe kissed above the clouds, sealing a love story that had begun with conflict and grown into something neither had imagined possible. As the aircraft banked gently toward their honeymoon destination, Rosa raised a glass of champagne and offered a toast that captured everything their journey had meant. To love that finds a way through any storm. To two people who learned that the heart wants what it wants, regardless of bank accounts or social status. And to my daughter, who finally found someone worthy of the fight she's been fighting all her life. What started as a slap at 40,000 feet became a love story that changed two lives forever. Sometimes the most powerful connections happen when you're brave enough to show someone exactly who you are, even if it involves a little turbulence along the way. Thank you for taking this journey with Chloe and Damon. If their story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in love that conquers all obstacles. And remember, dignity is never too expensive, and love is always worth the risk. The Gulfstream G650 soared through clear skies toward the future, carrying two people who'd learned that sometimes the most beautiful destinations are reached through the stormiest weather. And in the distance, the sun painted the horizon gold with promise.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.